Thank you for inviting me here. I'm going to talk a little bit about being at ease and what gets in the way of being at ease. Some of it will be from a psychotherapeutic point of view, some of it from a Dharma point of view or a Buddhist point of view. They're not so very different in their orientation. Clearly, part of the human condition is anxiety. That we have a huge capacity to think about ourselves and to think about the things that happen around us in ways which wind us up. From the Buddhist point of view, this is due to the way we conceptualize the world, that we see basically that we are a thing among things, that as soon as you're born, you're introduced into patterns of identification. Even before you're born, parents have all kind of fantasies about who's growing inside the mother's belly. Names are thought about, often plans for the future are thought about. So the infant who's developing is being wrapped into a whole conceptual matrix. And as soon as you're born, these projections continue more and more. So the baby is being welcomed into a world which has particular lineaments. It's got particular shapes and patterns and organizational structures, some of which support freedom, but many of which are designed to promote social adaptation. When we look around, we can see there are many things that we might not agree with in how society is structured, and yet we've got to find a way to survive. And in order to do that, we have to learn to bend the knee, to develop our plasticity so that we can make the accommodations that are necessary to fit in. This doesn't always work out very well. Even if the family that we grow up in is very harmonious, even if the school we go to is supportive, there's going to be tensions because we are faced always with choice. The human condition is marked by excess and lack. We have an excess of creativity. That is to say, we can imagine all sorts of scenarios which are not actual. We could imagine having different lives. It's very common for small children to have imaginary friends, to play all sorts of games in which a simple object can be transformed into many other potential objects. Part of going to school is learning to rein in one's imagination so that what is being presented as the facticity, the defined givenness of our situation is encouraged to take precedence over the ways in which we could imagine it being. This is often a big problem for children, particularly as they move from primary school into secondary school, because you have to accept that your value in the world is going to be established by your capacity to fill yourself with other people's ideas. And if you bring too many of your own ideas up, you will be seen to be distracted. That is to say, social alignment involves paying attention to patterns which have already been established by other people. So you start to experience the conflict or the tension between the patterns of your family of origination, the patterns of your established in a particular classroom in primary school, patterns of the interactions which are normal in the playground of the school that you go to. And inside that, you've got to work out what is right, what is wrong, what do you like, what do you not like. Some children are drawn towards identifications which put them at the heart of things. Others are drawn towards identification that can make them marginal. How should we live? Should you encourage a child to be more mainstream? Should you support them in pursuing their own particular trajectory of desire? These are difficult issues for parents, because there is the sense, oh, I'm helping to mold this person, to shape them so that they get the best possible interface with the world. Now, That would make sense if we were living in a vast jigsaw puzzle, that the world had a definite shape. And so you can see that the young person needs to adapt towards that environmental figuring, prefiguring, and take up a particular shape. But of course, we don't live in a world like that. We live in a world where there's always change. New possibilities are arising. Cultural patterns are changing, the economic situation is changing, the political situation is changing. So what is it that we should be adapting towards? If there is this ongoing tension between being true to myself and paying the price of belonging, what is it that I'm supposed to belong to? In the very fragmented culture that we live in now, there isn't actually all that much established pattern of social alignment. Unless you run foul of the police, basically you can do what you like. So how will I be? This question, which is of course a very profound and very helpful question if we take it as a life path, can be sidestepped by merging with pre-conceptualized ideas that we receive from other people. My life is going to be formulated around getting a good job, making a lot of money, finding a way to impress other people, finding a way to sleep with lots of people. There are many solutions that people come up with about what the meaning of their life might be. Do these remove anxiety, stress, confusion, disease, being ill at ease with oneself? Perhaps not. Because the tension which arises is between my conceptualization of myself, my identity, largely based on what I have identified with, and the notion that there are requirements. But who's going to set these requirements? Who should I follow? Who can I believe in? Who can I trust? Quite difficult for many people to believe in political parties nowadays. For many people, it's difficult to believe in many established religions. Then, who knows? Should I trust myself? We look back as we get older and we think of the many different mistakes and confusions we've been caught up in. We think, well, I can't really trust me, and I can't trust you. It's scary. So you can see that there's a sort of pervasive hesitancy which lurks around in the world. How to be decisive if I don't really know how things are going to unfold outside myself, or really that I have a clear, predictable sense of what's happening inside me. Because we are changeable creatures. We have fluctuations of mood, fluctuations of intention. Probably in our houses we've got objects, ornaments, bits of clothing, books and records which we collected at some stage in our lives, which are now less and less relevant to us. We might look back and think, why was I ever into that? It seemed a good idea at the time, but that time is gone. How come I put myself into that fully, or rather I seem to be occupied by that? I was taken over by that fixation of kind of music or dance style or clothing style, hairstyle, whatever it is, and then it's gone. If that was me, and that really felt like me, but it doesn't feel like me now, what is the meanness of me? If I'm such a fickle creature, if I'm taken over by my fancies, if I'm actually quite whimsical, yet I'm educated to believe that I am a rational, autonomous agent, somebody who could sit down and think about life and make plans and see if things get a bit off target and then revise and regroup and move more in the proper trajectory towards my goal. If we've been educated in that vision of ourselves, the actuality of our whimsicality is very scary. We have, of course, the lineage from Freud about the idea of the unconscious. There are aspects of ourselves that we will never clearly know, and yet which are operative inside us. That we are strangers to ourselves because we're estranged from ourselves. Now, is that established as a definite fault line? Are we always cut off from the wholeness of our being, whether one imagines that in terms of some historical sequence, that we were once in the Garden of Eden, where everything was simple, and then we're exiled from that. Many cultures have originatory stories of that kind. Or would we see it as something internal, that aspects of ourselves are being repressed, but also streams moving inside us are beyond our cognizance? We cannot know ourselves. It's one of the reasons why it's helpful to have friends, because they can let you know when you're getting lost, because we don't see what we're up to. On one level, that's quite terrifying. If I'm in charge of myself, but I don't see myself clearly, then I'm like a drunk driver in charge of my life. Can I ever sober up? What would be the method of sobering up? Is there anybody sober? Is there anybody who's got a clear idea about what they're up to? Because we get all these ideas. You can read about Eastern religions, you can go into Western religions, you can read Plato and Aristotle. There are so many interesting thinkers who come up with their conceptualizations of what we're about. What these do is to offer us narratives, interpretations, which are more or less coherent and which we may find to be more or less fitting to the particular current topology of our existence. Because the contours of our existence, our felt sense of who we are, changes through time. At certain periods we're drawn in one direction and then we're drawn in another. So if we're looking for the reassurance that we're okay by finding parallel patterns in the world, if what I've said is going in the right direction, that would indicate that that juxtaposition, that harmony, is always going to be just for a brief period of time. Because the outer shapes change and our inner shapes change. What appears to be meaningful can become meaningless. And that can be a very terrible thing. The proportion of the population in Britain who goes to the Christian churches now is not so high, but certainly in the, from about the 1920s onwards, there was an enormous amount of discussion and writing about the question of the loss of faith. How could it be that you're educated in a particular system which seems to encapsulate you, seems to hold you in its warm, comforting bosom, and then it fades away? And what you believed in, you can no longer believe in. This is a very profound thing. And of course, people experience this a lot in love relationships. They meet someone, they feel attracted to them, they feel they fall in love, and in that moment they see some profound, even ultimate value in the other person. Things go well for a while, and then there are problems. If you're behaving this way to me, then you're not who I thought you were. And I fell in love with you because I thought you were who I thought you were. Now that means I fell in love with my own projection, with my own idea about you. And when I wake up to the fact that you're not my fantasy, you're some other bugger wandering around in the world, oh, I don't know that I love you anymore. That's very difficult, isn't it? So therefore reality is the enemy of fantasy. Well, we know that. But it's quite a painful thing then to see that so many of the deep feelings that we have inside are conjured up for us on the basis of our own fantasies, of our mental constructions which we project out onto the world or see as being actually existing in the world in a self-existing way. If you fall in love with someone, you feel that you have some privileged truth about them. And even if you introduce that person to your friends and they're not quite as certain as you are, you feel, but that's because you don't really understand them. They're really nice in your fantasy. Now, from a Buddhist point of view, this is just a subset of a very normal structure of misconception. For example, here is a glass of water. It's very obvious that what I'm holding in my hand is a glass of water. The glassness of the glass is in the glass. That's obvious. It just is a glass of water. Not necessarily. Because if it was a glass of vodka, and I had a few full glasses of vodka, being a Scottish person, ill repute, I might be inclined to smash the glass and stick it in your face. In which case, I'm holding a dangerous weapon. Now, normally, because we are very nice, polite people, we think it's a glass for drinking from. But people do use this as weapons, as the accident emergency hospitals all over Britain have to face. So, the glassness of the glass is held in place by our concept of what it is. The glassness of the glass is the meeting place between the potential of what is in my hand and the particular form of conceptualization that I have and bring to bear on it. So, for example, say this glass was a precious family heirloom and there was a small child of 3 and they grabbed it. I said, oh, careful with that. Listen, I'll give you a plastic one. Oh, look at this, it's red, bright red. It's a horrible, horrible thing. And you swap it around because the child doesn't see the value. We see the value. We see the value of the glass because we know this is my great-great-grandmother's glass. It's been in the family for 150 years. That is not in the glass. That is in your head. That is your narrative that you're projecting onto the glass. And therefore, the anxiety about, is it going to break, is your own production. The glass is not intrinsically valuable. The value is your projection. The world is our projection. The world is our interpretation. That's quite a strong idea. What it means is that moment by moment, when we encounter situations, these situations are not self-existing. That flies in the face of what we learn in school in terms of science. We learn about matter, that matter is neither created nor destroyed. It gets moved around into particular shapes, and when it's in a particular shape, it manifests as something which can be known, apprehended, and employed in a way which is harmonious or disharmonious with its nature. So you can see in this room there are these bluey purpley chairs that we're sitting in. These are blown plastic sitting on metal legs, and they are designed to be cheap and cheerful, which is very useful for public buildings like this. When we make use of objects like that, we expect them to support our weight. We have expectations that The world is safe on the basis of my knowledge about it. Because I can interpret the world correctly, I know how to behave. That is to say, there is an object out there which, if I know about it, I will be able to use it properly. What I was suggesting just before is a rather different view. It's saying, whatever is out there, you will never apprehend, because the movement of your mind towards the objects of the world is the process of the co-creation of the world. It's not that there is a chair there before you see it, but rather that you have been educated to perceive the chair in that way. Because if you had a bunch of 5-year-old boys in here, they could do all sorts of different things with these chairs. And a bunch of 5-year-old girls would probably do very different things. Some might make a beautiful little castle, some might make kind of defensive thing and have them moving around as tanks and big guns. Because these objects would be incorporated into the children's imaginations and therefore be expressive of that imagination. They would become part and parcel of the field of imagination of the child. Well, we are not children anymore, so we've put that away, and we now see things for what they are. This is not true. What we have done is entered into a more prosaic, conservative, and tedious diminishment of our imaginative capacity in order to have the prediction not only that we know what a chair is, but that other people will know that we know what a chair is, and therefore other people will see that we are normal. Children of 5 are not very concerned with being normal unless they're being edged out of their little gang in the school. But we are very concerned to be normal. We are very concerned that other people won't think we're too weird, because there's a price for being weird. It's not nice. People think about you when they're weird. They tell stories about you. If you're normal, then it's very nice because you can hide. It's like if you see these nature programs on the telly and it's a big herd of deer and they're all galloping together and there's a lion coming. It grabs one on the outside. It doesn't grab the one in the middle. That's the same for us in life. If you're in the middle of the herd, you do bog standard normal. Don't pick on me. I'm just like you. Why do you pick on me? Pick on them. So this is a generalized fear and anxiety which is around. And it comes about from our betrayal of our own imagination. Now, very often we see imagination as a kind of fantasy construct, that we are going to create something which is untrue. So a novelist or a filmmaker sets out to construct a storyline which we can believe in, but which is not actually true. We cannot go and meet the characters that are in the novel. But by reading the novel, by offering ourselves to the novel, it is as if these characters become real. This is what Aristotle described as suspending disbelief. That if we're too skeptical, if we're too suspicious, if we're keeping our distance, we will be afforded a particular kind of clarity, because we'll see with that separative perspective, we'll see things in their proper place, but we'll be a bit lonely and cut off. It's actually very pleasurable for us to give ourselves to something, to be carried away by a good movie, to fall into a wonderful novel, and you get so interested in what's going to happen. Suspending disbelief allows us a fusion into another world. Now, we accept as adults who've got to hold our lives together in various ways, that experiences like going to the cinema or reading a novel, that's a kind of holiday. That's a kind of time out from the grim, fixed realities of ordinary life. But maybe there is no grim, fixed reality. Maybe everything is imagination. It's not that the grim, fixed stuff is out there. The grim, fixed stuff is in us. Once we fall into over-fixated thoughts, self-attacking propositions, limited conceptualizations about our identity, the ground that we are standing on becomes narrow, predetermined, overdetermined, so that we are preoccupied by accumulations of past experience which come to be a seemingly substantial basis for our sense of who we are. I am who I think I am. And that's reinforced by I am who I think that you think I am. So being full of these thoughts, memories, hopes, plans, and fears, these are acting as a kind of lens that I'm looking through to see the world as it is. Believing in these mental constructions as the guarantors of the truth of the situation which is actually occurring out there, or actually occurring as myself, I've got to make a go of it, because this is how it is. This is how it is. Life's about managing your life as you find it. You know, you can't just get a new life. We're stuck in it. But this new life that we would like isn't possible because we're full of old thoughts, old beliefs, old assumptions. Assumptions are a way of making life very quick. You can buy pre-prepared meals. You can pop them in the freezer. You can come home at night and you're tired and you stick them in the microwave and then you eat it. And it's just food. It probably doesn't taste great, but you're cold and you're hungry and it's all right. That's what most of our mental activity is. Out of the freezer of our memory bank, into the microwave of our current moment of agitation, we pluck out the stuff and with a big or small spoon according to the situation. Where's the freshness? The freshness is there, phenomenologically speaking. It is in the phenomena themselves, in what's coming in through our eyes, our ears, our nose, tongue, skin. The senses are always of the moment. The senses are not existing in time. Our interpretation of the data which is given in the immediacy of the sensory moment, that is based on the past. We approach the freshness of the world with our old assumptions. So that would be as if every time you went to the market and you bought some new ingredients, you went home and popped them in a pot that's already covered with mold. How would the food ever taste fresh? How would we get rid of the past? We made up of the past. We went to school, maybe went to college later. We've learned so many things in our lives. Some people, unfortunately, are in car crashes and other kinds of traumas, and they get brain injuries, they have amnesia. They have to spend a lot of time coming back into a working relationship with the world. They have to build slowly, a new memory bank that helps them function. Surely we are our history in some ways. But what I would suggest is that our history exists like ingredients in a kitchen. You have jars of herbs, you've got spices, salt, pepper, all kind of things which can add flavor. You don't just open every little jar and bung it into a big pot. You go with what is the fresh and what is the dried herb. What would their relationship be? If you have tomatoes, would you want a lot of sage? Oh, perhaps you might use oregano instead. That might work in a more harmonious way with the tomato. We don't need to apply the oregano. So if we see our life experience in that way, the choice is how to mobilize or how to allow the free arising of my spontaneous expression as myself into this moment in the way that is most harmonious for my being in the world with others. That is to say, if I'm wanting to connect with you, if I'm wanting to prepare something that you might be able to eat that will be palatable for you, I need to pay attention to how you are. And therefore, your tongue is the determinant of my spice. But if the spices and herbs are controlled by our assumptions of what is true, by our memory, by our own tongue, we're essentially cooking for ourselves. And as we know, sadly, a great deal of human communication is simply serial monologuing. One person says something, the other person replies, but it's like ships passing in the night, because there's no real contact. Because if you really listen to someone else and you're touched and moved by them, you have to respond to what is there, to how this person is in the moment, not according to your sense of who they really are. Oh, cheer up, you'll feel better tomorrow. Why would you say that to somebody who's sad? You don't know how long they'll be sad for. It doesn't matter whether they feel better tomorrow. Today they're sad. But I don't know what to say if they're sad. Why not? What should I say? That won't be answered by any should. If you see their face, if you see the sadness around their eyes, and you let that in through your eyes, and your heart opens, something will come out. I don't know if it would. I get lost. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. As if every human communication had to pass through central command, the cognitive center, where things will be processed and assessed according to our template. Just as the world of medicine is being controlled by the fascism of the NICE guidelines, based on pseudoscientific research, particularly in the area of mental health, a completely despicable way of the winner takes all, in which models of therapy which have got a lot of research behind them are seen as fantastic and proven, and there's no money then available to carry out research on the other models, which have been running for 40, 50 years, but never get the randomized control trial, and therefore can never say, hey, we exist too. This is called science. This is despicable. But in the same way, once you install a particular litmus test, a particular proving test, this is proper, this is kosher, this is halal, we all got some idea about this is good, this is bad. Once you have that installed, it's nice, because then you know what to do. If you work in the NHS, like I do, you have to be a professional. That's just to say, you have to know. So you do what you know. I like what I know, and I know what I like. If I know what I like, and I like what I know, I don't need to know anything new. Therefore, I'm a confident professional. If I was to inquire into the basis of my somewhat smug assumption, I would find that it would start to unravel. How shall I be? Who are you? What will I say to you? If you start to meet with me and show me yourself and tell me about yourself, this becomes multifactorial. There are many different aspects here. How will I respond? I have to find the response, that is to say, to allow the response to arise through me towards you. The more there is a central command predicting and organizing on the basis of reassuring me that I know what I'm doing, I will be doing a violence towards you. Because I will be delivering you something on the basis of my need to feel competent. And of course, in power differential structures like counseling and therapy, it's very easy for the person who is in the seat of power to keep all their clothes on and get the client or the patient to take their clothes off, to investigate their world as if one was a kind of interrogator. The light is shining on the other because we, blessed beings, are the source of light. I'm here to illuminate the darkness that you wander in. But of course, we're all in dark and we're all light. The darkness is actually our accumulated knowledge. We're hidden from ourselves by our knowledge about what is going on. Knowing and knowing about are not the same, but they tend to be fused again and again in the ordinary conducting of our life situation. To know is to see and receive. That is to say, it starts from a relationship with the world which is passive receptive, not as an active agent, not as a kind of phallic invasion which is going to do something to the world. But, oh, this is what is there. Now, I can only receive what is there if I have space inside me. It is my openness or emptiness or lack of preoccupation which is actually the basis of my hospitality to you. You know, if you go to someone's house and they invite you round and they have a white carpet and a white sofa, and then they give you a glass of red wine, there's a kind of anxiety that goes with that. You're not going to relax. Some environments allow you to be yourself. And if there's a bit of a mistake, it doesn't really matter. Life goes on. But other environments are a little bit anxiety-provoking. I don't want to interfere with how they have structured their life. That is not hospitality. Hospitality means there is a space for you. That is to say, I am available because you can avail yourself of me. Now, what does that mean? Someone avails themselves of me. Is that on my terms or their terms? All of us exist as a huge potential, a potential which is often hidden from ourselves by our own conceptualization of ourselves, but also by other people's conceptualization of us. In my working life, of working many different clinics, seeing all sorts of different people, couples, families, and so on, therapeutic communities, I would say that of all the, let's call them patients who I've met, most make 20% use of me. Occasionally you meet someone who gets 80% of you. I'm trying to say, you can have more. You can have more. But they want to go round and round and round. So shut up. But it's very important. I tell you the same thing again. Poking about in your poo is not going to tell you much about your life. It's going to tell you about what you ate. It's going to tell you about your history, about the past. But you'll only understand me if you know about my childhood. This is not true. What it means is you will only know about me if I tell you a lot about me. And now I know your story and you know your story and we agree you've had a hell of a story. Which makes it pretty difficult to do anything to help. So in that way you can easily get into a confluence, a flowing together into a tract agreement that life is hopeless. But actually, in the very moment that somebody is telling the same tract, repetitive story again and again, there is freedom. Somebody is speaking. Who is the speaker? Me. Who are you? I'm the one that's speaking. Who is the one that's speaking? Me. This gets very solipsistic. This creates an unbreakable circle. I am who I am, and I'm the one that's doing it. I'm just being me. What more do you want? It's almost impenetrable. It's like a heavy, thick waterfall, like the Niagara Falls. You can't see what's behind it, because the flow of conceptualization held in place by the fearful notion that I am who I am, I know who I am, and I'm me. But everybody in this room can call themselves me. At least I'm called James. Maybe there's 2 or 3 people also called James here. That's not so bad. I can share my Jamesness with a few people. But if everybody here is willing to say, I am me, anybody here find that difficult? No. I am me. No, I'm me. You shut up. I'm me. You're you. If we're all me, and I'm just me, this is the great drug of forgetfulness. This is the answer which is designed to annihilate the possibility of inquiry. This is the answer which is always popping up, so that the question, the deep question, what does it mean to be alive? What is this existence? Here we are, breathing in, breathing out. We hear sounds, we see things, there are smells, there's a taste in our mouth. Experience is arising. Who is the experiencer? If we come at this from the level of narrative, conceptualization, we can tell our story in infinite ways. And of course we do that. If your parents are still alive, you tell them one story about how you're doing. You tell your friends one story. You might tell a partner another. If you've got kids, you tell them another story. You tell your boss at work another story. Your one life, your just being me, is more like a diamond with many different facets. And as we face other people, we present different aspects of ourselves. Nobody will ever see the whole of us. Even the people in history that we know as the most, what we might say, evil, foul people, the torturers, the commandants in the concentration camps and so on, they had friends, they had partners, they had kids. Somebody loved them, but they were terrible. From our point of view, from our perspective, with our particular interpretive matrix, yes, what they did was terrible. But it was a way of bringing home the bacon. There was food on the table. Little wifey was quite proud. My man's big. Look at his uniform. It's very nice, very smart. You get a chauffeur-driven car. Why not? In this way, we can see we can never, ever catch the whole truth of someone else. Similarly, we can never catch the whole truth of ourselves. So one of the things that makes us ill at ease is that we live in relation to ourselves. This is problematic and I'll return to it shortly. But we stand or we live in relation to ourselves in a gesture of getting hold of ourselves, appropriating ourselves, apprehending ourselves, catching bits of ourselves, and formulating ourselves in different ways to different situations. If I'm that multiple, there's probably more. Yeah. We live as excess. We are rich. We are fecund. There is no end to any of us in this room telling stories about our lives, giving our commentaries on what's happening in the garden, what sort of birds are there at the moment, what's happening to the price of milk, and so on. There's endless things to comment on. And as new aspects of the world impinge on us, we find ourselves moving into opinions and responses we perhaps hadn't imagined we would be doing. We are ungraspable. Other beings are ungraspable. But does that mean that I don't know who I am? It does. But that's terrible. You have to know who you are. Otherwise you're lost. How would you get on in the world if you didn't know who you were? Oh. I don't like this anymore. Can I go home now, please? This is the sort of anxiety that arises when people have what's called a mental breakdown. It's often exactly on that point. The center cannot hold. This centrifugal force has us dispersing out, fragmenting, and we are all over the place. We're not all of a piece anymore, and we can't work out what's going on. It's before we were adding and subtracting bits of ourselves. We think, well, I've got bad qualities, I've got to get rid of them, and I'm quite good at this, I'll do more of that. Trying to build up our kind of Lego profile of all the little ingredients of ourselves, juxtaposing them into socially acceptable patterns. When that starts to fall apart, actually, there can be a freedom. Because the patterns which gave us the reassuring image that we knew who we were starts to fade away. We don't know who we are. Is that wrong or bad? No. But if we're going to hold ourselves together, we do want something to cling to. Now, why do we have to hold ourselves together? Because we don't want to fall apart. Okay. So that would indicate that the basic hypothesis that we have of ourselves is that we are some kind of entity, that we are a thing operating in a world of things. Things need to hold together, otherwise they don't work. All the bits have to be in the right place, functioning together. This involves planning and control and the effort of maintenance. This mechanical model of the human condition is increasingly common now as we move into an Android culture, where people are programming their telephones and not really quite acknowledging that they're being programmed as they program. That we come into a reciprocal relationship with the binary oppositional structure of the mathematical programs that derive these incredible apps and so on that we can make use of. We're caught into a world of yes, no, right, wrong, good, bad. It's either this or that. If it's this, it's not that. If it's that, it's not this. Then we know where we are. Are you a boy? Are you a girl? Are you young? Are you old? Are you happy? Are you sad? But we are not like that. We are complicated. Therefore, when you try to tell a story about yourself, you meet someone new and you want to introduce yourself, you're caught up in the beginning of an endless story, because there's always something more to say. Whatever you say about yourself, I was thinking what I said yesterday. wasn't really like that in my family. Yeah, my dad was a bit difficult and so on, but actually we had some quite good times. I used to play golf with him and so on. So it just endlessly mushrooms out because this is our life. In 1 second, this whole world is revealed to us. Come into this room, everything is here. At the end, we walk out the door, there's the church, and there's the sky, and the trees, and it's all there. We get the whole shebang, just like that, in a second. We don't have to sit there and work it out bit by bit, painting by numbers. We always get excess. There is so much. And yet, we feel a lack. Something's missing in me. I'm not quite right. If only I was more like you. You seem to be able to do that. You're so confident. You can do. Oh God, the years are going by. This is not as good as it gets. It's here. What is the lack? The lack is the self-abandonment of our being, which comes through grasping at a notion of identity which is always a betrayal. Whatever you say about yourself may be situationally true, but it cannot be intrinsically true. It is a momentary construct. That is to say, self-knowledge belongs in the house of communication or the house of compassion. It is relational. Our identity is relational. We come into being with other people. We present ourselves according to whether we like them or we don't like them, whether we feel a sexual frisson or not, or whatever it would be. There's expansion and contraction. And this is dynamic and changing. It is not fixed. Identity is a world phenomenon, or a field phenomenon. Our identity is exactly the site that marks our participating in the world with others. It's our being in the world with others. But what is this being itself? What is the ground or the basis out of which I reveal myself to myself and to the other in the moment of coming into being with them? Where does this come from? This is being. We are here as a presence which is there prior to any gesture that we make of communication. Say, for example, you go to a party, or even coming here, you meet some people, and you find, oh, I can have a nice chat with this person. Then you turn and look at someone else, you think, oh, can I say that? That's not a sign that you're not a nice person. It's a sign that our connectivity with others is also energetic. It comes from the belly. It's an embodied phenomenon. It's not about having social skills, because if you apply your social skills, you're just going through the emotions. You're having a pleasant conversation, but there's no juice in it. The juice is the gift of life, that we connect with some people more than with others. That is to say, it's not a conscious egoic decision. It's not a sign of our agency as social participants. But the world is revealed to us in the givenness of what happens when we're in proximity. We open or we contract. We don't decide to do that. We can learn to manage it if it's a bit extreme. But here we are in an unfolding, fluctuating, dynamic flow of experience. One experience after another, after another, after another. There's a lot going on. Who am I? So we have two main roads that we take at this point. And I describe them in terms of traditional notion of the 5 elements. The 5 elements, which you find in many, many cultures, you have earth, water, fire, wind, and space. Wind and air, it's the same kind of thing. It's the moving, subtle phenomenon. Earth is stable. Water, fire, and wind clearly are moving elements. And then you have space. Space is stable as well. It's ungraspable, but it's very stable. It doesn't change. It's the infinite space within which phenomena are occurring. What tends to happen in our upbringing is that space, because it is so subtle, is discounted. And we turn our mind more towards what is manifest, the earth, the water, the fire, and the wind. Now, the three moving elements there are the turbulence of our life, sometimes exciting, sometimes anxiety-provoking. When the turbulence gets a bit much, we seek something to cling on to. That's the earth element. I want to secure the territory. I want to know where I am. I want to know something definite about myself. I am this. So when we were kids, I learned I was Scottish. That became very important. I'm Scottish, I'm not English. I didn't know what that meant, but anyway, you say that. I don't like English. I grew up in Glasgow. I don't like the people from Edinburgh. I've never been to Edinburgh. I don't like the people from Edinburgh. And I grew up on the west end of Glasgow. I don't like the people from the south and the east. And I grew up in one street. I didn't like the people in the other street. And I didn't like my brother either. So I'm me and all the rest is shit. That's a very common Glaswegian way of establishing identity. Which, in more polite language, is called the rule of the excluded other. That it's quite difficult to define yourself. It's much easier to say what you're not. So by excluding all these other factors in the field, the residue is myself. And because you never quite finish excluding the others, you never have to actually give a true veridical account of who you are, which is just as well, because we are not. We are being and becoming. And if being and becoming are aligned, then we have belonging. Belonging is the feeling of participating in the shared field of activity. However, if we ignore being, and I'll say a bit more about what I mean by that term shortly. If we ignore being, then we just have becoming. So moment by moment by moment, we're becoming this or that. And then we're having to hang on to these fragments, these moments of experience, extrapolating them from their context and trying to build up a picture of who we are, what we like, what we don't like, what our plans are. There's a solidity in that. So we cleave to the earth element. The world is full of things. There are some people I like, these are my friends. There are some people I don't like, these are my enemies. There are foods that I like, there are foods that I don't like. There's some kind of clothes that I wear, some that I don't. We push away what we don't like and we try to bring towards ourselves what we do like. So we live by maintaining an identity which is based on editing. We bring our prejudice, our predilection into the emergent field of experience moment by moment on the basis of our selective attention. And of course, the curious thing is, other people choose something different. Why would they do that? It's because they're daft. If I was you, I wouldn't do that. But I'm just me, so you do you. Bad luck. I'm better off than you. Therefore, having that sort of a thought, what you do doesn't need to bother me. You go into a restaurant, you look at the menu, you choose something. Other people eat other things, but this is what I like. This is what we're doing all the time. Moment by moment, this infinite menu of the world is in front of us. But, oh well, waiter, you know what I like? Just give me the usual. No wonder we are ill at ease and alienated from ourselves. If, as I'm suggesting, our self is a potential which is called into being in its richness through the widest possible participation, if I narrow my gaze about how the world is, and exclude a great deal of what is here in front of me, I'm also excluding a great deal of myself, because so many potential aspects of how I could be remain dormant, because I'm always in this repetition compulsion of the reinstalling of my imagined notion of who I am. So in that sense, I'm making a differentiation between identity as a construct, just as we have passports, and in the wartime we had identity cards, which showed officialdom who we were. When you go through passport control, this little booklet lets you come back into the country. If you don't have it, if you've lost it, then you have to go through a lot of hassle. But if you say, look at the photo, look at me, we are the same, the important document confirms and blesses you as being a proper citizen of the country. That is to say, our identity is outside ourselves. Our identity, as I was indicating, is part of communication with the world. It is not an X-ray of our soul. It's not a true definition of who we are. It's merely a set of conventions which we move around and shift according to the different environments that we encounter in our lives. But prior to that, there is being. What is being? Being is what is here. It is just being here. If you go out, you can do it inside a house or outside, but you sit and you just allow life to happen. Thoughts are coming, sensations in the body, the senses are open, you hear sounds, smells, and so on. And they're passing, and they're passing, and they're passing. Experiences are occurring, many different experiences. Some you would take to be pleasurable, some you take to be unpleasurable, but the whole gamut of experiences occurring. You can get into it as the busy manager, trying to protect yourself from the things you don't like, trying to hang on to more of what you do like. But if you just relax that for a moment, you're the experiencer. It's all going on, and you're just experiencing it. Who is that experience? In the tradition, this is the basis for meditation. Meditation is about gradually dissolving the glue that binds subject and object together. Because as subject and object are turbulently turning, and we sit in our subjectivity, which is our sense of a personal self, me being who I am, who I know myself to be, takes us into the domain of our narrative about ourselves. When that is glued onto the unfolding patterning of the arising object, I'm endlessly busy. 24 hours a day, I'm adjusting and maintaining, and because of that arousal, that busyness, there's no sense of the space within which it is occurring. For example, you come in the door into this room and the chairs are laid out. And you think, oh, it's a place to sit. You think, oh, the seat at the front, probably is going to sit there. Okay, I'll sit near the front, near the back, whatever's your fancy. Oh, it's in the hall. This hall is a very interesting shape with a sloping roof and how the lights are. A lot of the potential of the space is hidden simply by the way the chairs are laid out. If you came in early before the chairs were laid out, you become much more aware of the potential of the space that's there. That the chairs could be done in a spiral, in a circle, in a square, in an oblong, in an ellipsis. You could have set them out anyway. But once they're done in these serried rows, it creates a particular mood. We sit in it, and this is the room. The room is set up for a talk. and you're getting a talk. So that was jolly good. But we didn't see the space. It's just the same. When the furniture in your mind is installed, you don't see the space because you're following thought, feeling, sensation, round and round and round without ceasing. Theatre is only possible on the basis of the empty stage. It's the empty space which allows the elaboration of the drama of life. Once the drama starts, you see the actors moving around, maybe there's a few props, you're captivated by the activity, and the space is invisible. Even if you go to the ballet, there's all this gorgeous movement in space. Without space, they wouldn't be moving. But what we see is bodies in movement. We see shapes. It's the same with paintings. Usually, unless we learn to look at art, we are captivated by what is figural, and then there's the background. But actually, without the background, you wouldn't have the foreground. If you go to look at, say, Rembrandt's paintings, his backgrounds tend to be very, very dark indeed. And you have these faces, bodies kind of looming out of that with their intensity out of the dark. Without the dark, you wouldn't have the intensity of the figure. The figure and the ground go together. And the ground here is always the space. And the same for our mental life. Space is the basis. Thoughts move through time and space. Feelings arise in time and space. Sensations in the body occur because there is a space to receive them. If you're a bit distracted and you need a pee, oh, why is it going to shut up? I need to have a pee. But if you're really reading a book, this is good. You get back into it and you forget, so that the messages coming from your bladder, we would like a little release to say, oh, that will be all right. Okay, a bit longer. But if you're distracted, this message impinges much more. It's exactly the same. If you can release the fixation of attention on the ever-occurring movement of life, you start to see the space within which the movement is occurring. The fact is, movement is ceaseless. Since you wake up in the morning till you go to sleep at night, there's always something happening. People change their posture as they're sitting here. You suddenly find yourself scratching. You get some little pain in your back. You suddenly remember, oh my God, tomorrow I've got to do this, that. We are like kind of a market square with all sorts of messages passing through it. That doesn't stop. Therefore, on that level of your existence, you will not find peace. You will not find peace. Movement is moving. It doesn't stop. However, the space within which the movement is occurring is never moving. The space is always still. One of the big problems in mental health is that people try to stop the movement. I've got these negative thoughts, I want them to stop. You can spend a lot of time trying to do that. You can learn all sorts of tricksy methods of doing it. These techniques tend to lose their potency after some time. The key thing is, who is it who is caught by the thought? What is it that gives a thought the power to catch? The power is not in the thought. Thoughts arise and go by. It is our proclivity, our tendency, our susceptibility that makes us drawn towards that thought at this particular time. Just as if you go shopping in a big store, there's many kinds of shoes, there's many kinds of t-shirts, and your gaze is drawn towards one of them. Other people are drawn to something else. Oh, these are fabulous shoes, fabulous, just what I've been looking for. Other people were not looking for these shoes. Why not? They're fabulous for you. That is to say, they're not intrinsically fabulous. They're fabulous for you according to your interpretive matrix. And they may not always be fabulous for you either. The glue, the potency, the power is not in the shoes. It's in your incorporation of the shoe into the patterning of what is desirable. And the other shoes are organized into the patterning of what is undesirable. This is a mental activity. Oh no, but look how well the shoes made. Nobody else was running to get them. It is like this for you. Each of us lives a life of unique sensibility. Each of us is shining, radiant uniqueness. This is vital. This is alive. This is shining forth moment by moment, unrepeatable. So why are we so dull? It's remarkable. Life is vibrant. Life is actually, this is it. There ain't nothing but this. You, alive, having experiences. It was never anything but this. What kind of experiences you get is determined not by what is out there, because most of what is out there you've never seen, you've never tasted. It's determined by the furniture in this little box of yourself. Why do we hang on to that furniture? Because it's me. So what I'm suggesting is that if we want to be at ease with ourselves, we have to realize that what we take ourselves to be is better seen as being a range of ingredients. Because if you appropriate your narrative about yourself as something fixed and determined, it will be very difficult to change. And they tell you can see these programs like The Strongest Man in the World, and they have a big parked bus, and they've got to pull it with their teeth. Now, the most difficult bit is to get the bus moving. Once the bus is moving, it's easier. If you want to change something that's already in motion. Oh, but I've had these thoughts for a long time. I wake up in the middle of the night, they're always there. And are they there just now? They weren't there, they're here, then they go. They were there, they're not here, they'll come back. They're moving. If they're moving, you can move them. They're not fixed like a bus or a building. They feel like. Can I tell you how bad they are? It's been so difficult, my life. You don't understand. So hard. I think I'll refer you to a We stick ourselves. We are the stookies. We are the solid, glutinous mass. We jellify ourselves. We cover our world in aspic. Why? Because we want something. We want to know something definite. This is how we cheat ourselves. We are a potential which unfolds in a situation, and that the basis for that unfolding potential is open spaciousness, the unborn mind itself, as it would be described in Buddhism, or the Dharmakaya, the mind of the Buddha. That doesn't mean that it's completely random and unstructured. Of course we have patterns, but patterns are dynamic formations. We recognize patterns, but the recognition is not the thing itself. If you're out in the countryside and you see a beautiful a bush of beautiful wild roses, you think, oh, how lovely the wild roses are. That knowledge may allow you just to look at them for 2 seconds and then your gaze travels on. But if you open yourself and you go forward and you see the incredible pink and the white and the delicate formation, you receive it. And it's not just a wild rose. You are transformed in that moment of William Blake would call, clearing the doors of perception. The doors of perception are not covered by the muck of the world. They're covered by our knowledge, our assumptions, our sense that we are powerful agents who know what's what. So in a sense, freeing ourselves is to allow ourselves not to know, what Keats called negative capability, to be able to stay open and at ease and allow the unfolding of the world. Now, we don't need to worry, because if we take the image I offered you earlier about jars of herbs and spices, we have a lot of knowledge. You're not going to lose that knowledge. The question is, do you use it in a way that fits the situation? Because if you use the knowledge as a lens to see through, it will skew your vision to give you more of the same. And if you use it defensively to interpret, to give yourself power over the situation, you get a kind of drying that goes with that. We become sclerotic because we become rigid. And of course, the more rigid we become, the more fearful we become, because we're frightened that something will hit us and we'll fragment. Actually, our being in the world is very, when we allow it to be, it's very flexible, very soft, very dynamic. We're like seaweed in the ocean. We're moved around by events. I don't want to be moved around. Why is it that everything gets to me? Many people come down and they say, oh, I suffer from oversensitivity. How lucky. Every graveyard is full of people who are no longer sensitive at all. How will I deal with this? Well, you could enjoy it. Turn your oversensitivity towards things which are beautiful. Avoid situations which are difficult. When you, in the summertime, you take off your shoes and your socks and you might walk barefoot, then you have to practice at first. You walk on soft sand. After a month of doing that, you can start to walk on pebbly beaches and it's not so sore because the skin has thickened. In that way, we need to shift our interface, but of course, it's not about accumulating thicker skin. It's much more like a camera lens, which shifts the speed of the shutter according to the amount of light. That we as a system, as a living system, have a huge, immediate movement towards and away from things. If I run towards you and go to stick my finger in your eye, you turn away. It's just like that. We can trust our quickness. If we're here, it's there. It's just here. We're alive. You don't need to build up a big defense if you can move. And we're always moving. What traps us is our sense that we're not moving, that we are fixed, that we are entities, that we are things, that we are knowable objects, and therefore we are our own possession. I have to take care of myself. That's a strange grammatical construct. Well, I am myself, and I have to take care of myself. So in order to take care of myself, I can't be myself. So I am myself, but I'm not myself, because if I was just myself, I couldn't take care of myself. Now, in one way, of course, that's true. A baby is itself, pissing and shitting whenever it wants and crying in the middle of the night. They can't take care of themselves. As the baby starts to get bigger, They learn to know that they need to have a pee before they go to bed. They learn to wipe their bum and so on. They learn to manage themselves, which is what, of course, has occurred to us. So we get used to the notion of a dualistic construct. There is me as a thing, and there's I as a subject. I am going to look after myself. Oh my God, I look in the mirror. What have I been doing? Right. Change. Health. Leave it to January. But in January, I will change my diet, get more exercise. I'm going to take better care of myself. I am in charge of myself. I am managing myself. Now, on one level, of course, this is true, but it's not the whole story. It sets up a huge amount of anxiety. Because if I'm going to take care of myself, why did I have that extra biscuit? I didn't need the biscuit. I didn't even really want the biscuit. I ate the biscuit. Who ate the biscuit? I ate the biscuit, but it wasn't really me because I had decided I wouldn't eat the biscuit. I sat there looking at the biscuit and said, I don't need that, I'll leave it on the plate. And then I was eating it. So how am I going to take care of myself when I don't know what I'm doing? And this is the problem of the egoic fixation on I am in charge. Because clearly our actuality is we're working with circumstances. There are external circumstances and there are internal circumstances. And some of our internal circumstances we would call impulses. And the impulse arises and moves through us and we find ourselves pouring another glass. Why am I drinking? Look at the time. So I am divided against myself. That would be the normal interpretation. But that presupposes I am the first person singular. If I'm the first person singular, if I am the whole circle, surely I should know myself by now. Surely if I make a decision, I should be able to carry it through. Otherwise, come on. But we can't. And people berate themselves, torture themselves, and even kill themselves on that basis. I can't bring myself under control. I can't bring my eating under control. The government's about to blow billions of pounds on gastric bags because people can't control themselves. What I'm suggesting tonight is that that's because the whole paradigm of control is unhelpful. That actually we need to make friends with the complexity of our existence. We need to collaborate with the richness of the potential who can move in all different directions. And in order to do that, instead of taking up a rigid, if you like, earth element-based position, this is what I am going to do, in an almost counterintuitive way, we need to relax and open and trust that the spaciousness of our being is infinite enough to contain all these many tendencies. And by allowing them to be there, they take their proper place. It's when we put on the blinkers and we make a clear decision, we're putting a lot into the shadowland. And then suddenly it's arriving from left field, and we're taken over by our impulse. But if you open yourself to yourself, and you know, I have many voices, or I have many sub-personalities, or I have many aspects, or many facets. They're not always in harmony. Sometimes they are conflictual. But if I give them a place at the table, if they all know that they'll get something to eat, they calm down. If you remember the story of Sleeping Beauty, the father and mother are so proud at their beautiful daughter's birth that for her coronation they invite all the guests except the wicked witch, because we don't want someone like that at the feast. But she turns up and she puts a curse. And then you get the unfolding of the story. It's always dangerous to exclude. You have the return of the repressed. Whatever we don't want to know about ourselves doesn't fade away. It's just moving under the carpet. It's moving behind the walls. It will manifest sooner or later. So in order to be at ease with oneself, one actually turns and welcomes the richness of our existence as an unfolding, dynamic participant in a world which is beyond control, but not out of control. It's not in my control, but neither is it chaotic. It's patterns which, if I'm present, I can find the balance. I find the fulcrum point. And by my own flexibility and dynamic nature, I take my place, sometimes expanding, sometimes contracting, sometimes full of happiness, sometimes full of sadness. Each of these is valid. Why should we not be sad? Why should we sometimes not be lonely? Loneliness is a flavor. It's a color on a palette. What does it taste like? It's not poisonous. If you believe it's poisonous, you can start to be persecuted. Then you end up thinking, I'm depressed, you go to the doctor, you build up more and more of a story, I can't get rid of it, I've never felt like blah, 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 blah. Actually, what is this sadness? I am alone. I am unloved. What is that feeling? I am, it's still present, the being is here, the current flavor is unloved. What is that? There's a place for it. If you give it its place, it will vanish, because being unloved is a movement of the mind, a movement of sensation and feeling, offering hospitality to whatever is arising actually paradoxically allows it to go. If you sit in meditation, you will find your thoughts are always changing, feelings are always changing, sensation in the body is always changing. It's only when we are immersed in our narrative, which is clunky and solidified, that we stabilize notions about ourselves and hopeless. Oh, I can't do that. I don't know how you do it. I couldn't do that. We sit inside that narrowing definition, and because we know this about ourselves, we avoid the situation that would give us a chance to try. Oh, I wouldn't be as good as you. I'm not going to do it because you'll laugh at me, because you'll do that. How much of our life have we diminished out of this fruitless anxiety, endlessly comparing and contrasting? It doesn't matter what other people can do. If you block your own life force, if you hide the richness of yourself from yourself, you'll also be hiding it from other people. And we do it out of embarrassment, shame, guilt, pride, because we're not sure we'll get it right. So the evaluatory, judgmental approach, which in a sense can only be applied to real entities, becomes our imprisoning directive. But where are these real entities? I'm like this. How do you know? Again and again in the practice of psychotherapy, we see people imprisoned in core negative beliefs. Out of the family matrix or horrible events that have happened in life, people come to believe that they're useless or stupid or unlovable or dirty. And on the basis of that thought, which is repeated, but in itself as a thought lasts 1 second, less than a second, this transient momentary arising, when it arises, with its semantic glue, it appears to tell the whole truth about me, and therefore I can't. The libido or the prana, the chi, the life energy collapses on the basis of a transient thought. But everybody knows that about me. Oh no, they don't. If you keep trying to convert the world, they may just start to believe. So, just in brief summary, the key point, I think, for mental health in terms of deeper psychotherapy and meditation and so on, is to start to trust that we can be more present in the moment. That the accumulations of knowledge and information that we've had from the past can be reframed or re-identified as being potentials or tools or resources that we can call upon if necessary. But you will only know if it's necessary if you see what's there. If you've got a toolbox with different kinds of spanners and screwdrivers, you don't go into the box and take out your favorite screwdriver and then beat the shit out of a poor screw. You look at the screw and you think, oh, it's a star screw and it's got this side of grooves in it. And then you look, where's the screwdriver? Have I got one that fits? The screw comes first, not the fact that you love the screwdriver. And my dad gave it to me. It's the last thing he ever gave me. And I have to use it. If you see that image and you imagine that in yourself, that we have these beliefs and patterns, and we use them like a tool to open up everything in the world, but it doesn't fit. In our toolbox, we have many other keys, many other tools. So the royal route to happiness and relaxation is not to believe the stories you tell yourself about yourself, but to look at the world, look at your unfolding potential. Don't come to a premature conclusion. Don't mobilize on the basis of assumption and prediction. Just see what is there and feel your response. Allow the full reception of the situation to evoke the widest possible range of responses in yourself, and you'll find yourself being there in the moment. It's that easy, but it's difficult to do. Why? Because we won't let go of what we know. That's the ongoing work, to be at ease in ourselves and with others, to let go of what we know, to be available for what is. Right, that's it.